everyone, I'm back with another book review, this time of the book Every Day is for the Thief by Teju. The plot starts with the author in a Nigerian embassy in New York as he's preparing to go back to Lagos, and he shares his reactions and experience as he tries to process his visa application to Nigeria. And this sets the tone for how the story progresses throughout the novel, because as he shares his story, he focuses more on the moment, on the descriptions, and also on the experience, focusing less on the precise timing of how everything happens. So as he shares the story, you're not really thinking about whether it happened the day before, the day after, or 2 weeks before, or 3 weeks later, but really on the specific nature of each moment. And it almost makes the reader feel like they're taking away deep thoughts shared by the author in the novel. Now, most of you know what 419 is. It's used to describe online scams, usually done by email. People might email you and say, hey, I need your help to process this money from this account, and you're the only one that can help me, and I need you to pay this fee. It's oftentimes a scam or a trick. So here he explains his observations and his experience. He writes saying, "The man seated next to me in the internet cafe composes a message by the hunt and peck method. He presses one letter on the keyboard, searches for the next, presses that one, and so on. It is his one-finger technique that attracts my attention, but when my eye alights, not entirely accidentally, on his text, I catch my breath. The words I see him type, transfer, dear friend, deposit into your account forthwith, present incontrovertible evidence. He is composing a 419 letter. I've stumbled on the origin of the world-famous digital flotsam. I feel as though I've discovered the source of the Nile or the Niger. The man keeps at his typing with the single-mindedness of a hen picking a yard clean. Once, looking to my right in an internet cafe, and this surreptitious reading quickly becomes habitual for me, I see a letter being written from the chairman of the National Office for Petroleum Resources. The writer is a rough-looking man who is clearly chairman of nothing. There are other letters from the heirs of fictional magnates, from the widows of oil barons, and from the legal representatives of incarcerated generals. And they assert enterprising samples of narrative fiction that I realize that Lagos is the city of Sheherazades. The stories unfold in ever more fanciful iterations, and as in the myth, those who tell the best stories are richly rewarded. I found this to be a humorous way of ending the passage, because obviously in this situation, those who tell the best stories in the letters are often most successful in convincing the recipients of the letter to help them out, hereby getting tricked by the scam. And also, in any situation, oftentimes, those who tell the best stories, whether they're lies or actual stories, are the ones that get rewarded. And so I found that it was a play on words and an interesting way of closing the passage in a really thoughtful and humorous way. It added emphasis to the point and humor to the situation. Here, Teju is thinking about moving back to Nigeria. He's thinking about what it might require, and he shares his thoughts, writing, "There are practical issues to consider. There is the question of money, the question of professional development, and my other work. Serious questions for which there are answers, but there is also the question of my tolerance for the environment. Am I ready for all the rage Nigeria can bring out of me? There are various run-ins a humanist might have in such a place as this. Combined with traffic congestion, which is a serious problem in Lagos, and considering the 1,000 natural shocks in which the average Nigerian is subject, the police, the armed robbers, the public officials, the governments, the total absence of social services, the poor distribution of amenities, the environment is anything but tranquil. I have newfound respect for anyone who accomplishes any kind of creative work in the country. The problem used to be the leadership, but now when you step out into the city, your oppressor is likely to be your fellow citizen. His ethics eroded by years of suffering and life at the cusp of desperation. I'm not going to move back to Lagos. I'm going to move back to Lagos." For me, this reflects a state of mind that many Africans in the diaspora go through when they're contemplating and think about moving back to their home country. At first, there's the nostalgia and the romanticization of all the wonderful things that their home country has to offer. The warm weather, no cold, no snow, the fabulous beaches, the wonderful food. You can buy anything you need, by the roadside if that's something that you want. Just the fun and wonderful aspects of our culture as well. But oftentimes we seem to put at the back of our minds the difficulties of living back in our home country. And this is not about saying that one country is better than another. It's simply about culture shock. When you move from one country to another, the first week is often about the wonderful parts of it. And as you settle in, culture shock begins to take place, and then you have to adjust and come to terms with the reality of what you're facing. This can happen in any place. Even if you came from, let's say, Nigeria to the United States, you would still feel the same way. You would still go through culture shock. So it happens to everybody. And I think it's sometimes a surprise when Africans in the diaspora have to go back and they experience this culture shock again. They don't expect that they will have to be refamiliarized in such a real way. Here he's with a friend and they're having a conversation. In the book he writes, "We drink, there's much to talk about, and little, as happens when friends haven't met in a long time. I ask him if it's been a long drive from the island. He says, yeah, really long, man. Why do you say that? Do I look so tired? You have to time Lagos to drive just right getting on the bridge. You leave too late, a 40-minute journey could easily become 2 hours, sometimes more." Teju replies, "That is just crazy, but at least your car is air-conditioned." The friend says, "Ha, no chance." He shakes his head, we look at each other, and just at that moment there is a power cut and we both disappear. Isn't that genius? So the lights went out and they both disappeared, and that's the end of the scene. It could be, let's say, a play or an act. It's just so beautiful and so theatrical. I just found that moment so profound. I loved it. It's just a smooth transition. It says, and just at that moment there was a power cut and we both disappeared. And it's both ironic and also interesting and humorous that he would end that chapter that way. I'd have to say this is probably one of my favorite transitions in the book. I recommend this book if you're interested in a story about returning back home from the diaspora, about the complicated aspects of, being away from your home country and returning back. If you're interested in a different perspective on what Nigeria is, I'd also like to say as a disclaimer, Lagos is quite different from other cities in Nigeria. So when you go from Lagos to Abuja, there are differences. From Abuja to another city, there are other differences. And so the book is not completely representative of the whole of Nigeria. Yes, Lagos is in Nigeria, but it's a city in Nigeria. So I just like to provide context because I don't want anyone generalizing and saying that the whole of Nigeria is like this, the whole of Nigeria is not that. Let me know your thoughts below in the comments. Have you returned back to your home country? How was your experience? How did you find it? Do you relate to any of the stories I've shared here? I think Lagos is quite like New York. There's a lot that you can do and achieve, but it can often be very competitive because there's so many people there. And it's quite interesting that the author travels from the American New York to like Lagos, which is similar, which they're both, I would say, sister or twin cities. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment below, subscribe, and if you want to purchase the book, I've got a link for you down below where you can pick it up, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!